Hi, today I'm joined by Katherine Wilson, the nutritionist that works with us here at Integrative Family Medicine of Asheville, and we are going to dive into a conversation that I'm really excited to have. Thank you so much for having this conversation with me, Katherine.
Oh, I'm really excited to be here. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. So we had talked about, how can you tell the difference between all of the different diets that are popular right now? There's the paleo diet, anti-inflammatory, keto, Mediterranean. What are the main differences between those popular diets?
Oh, that's such a good question. I feel like I spend a lot of time talking with people about that. And I think that the starting point is that actually a lot of those diets have some real similarities. And that I kind of like to start with the similarities, which is like to really focus on eating whole foods, get away from processed food, sugar, sort of more of the standard American diet. So starting from there, then you break it down to like the Mediterranean diet. I like to really describe as more of a lifestyle diet. So it's really focusing on vegetables and fruits and fish and poultry and nuts and seeds and healthy oils like olive oil, some avocado oil. And the keyword for the Mediterranean diet I really think about is like moderation, right? So you can include grains, you can include beans, you can include nuts and seeds, like I said, healthy fats, some meats, but doing all of that really balanced. And so can you have some red meat in the Mediterranean diet? Yes, little bits, it's kind of it depends on how you design it. Some dairy, if you want to include dairy, and I'm focusing on the quality, of course, there. And then having, mostly as beverages, water, non-sugary drinks, adding a little bit of wine sometimes for the Mediterranean diet, if that fits in what you're trying to accomplish. And so the Mediterranean to me is a little more like, I like to say like user friendly. You're just trying to kind of change your diet and you're like, oh, what can I do? I can really focus on eating more whole foods and kind of get a different direction with the diet. And it can really help with a lot of health issues.
So moderation and lifestyle mode, they're kind of the key phrases for Mediterranean diet.
Absolutely.
And easy to shift into that. It's not a huge difference from the standard American diet, but whole foods, lots of vegetables and fruits, some red meat, some dairy, some wine, but in moderation.
Absolutely. Yes.
Okay. And then what about the others, like keto and anti-inflammatory and paleo?
Yeah. And so I'll just jump into paleo, and just like anything, there's so many different levels of paleo, but the kind of idea of paleo originally is to be eating foods that like would be foods that you would be able to hunt and gather, so meats and vegetables and nuts and seeds, and within that there'd be some oils in the form of like where they come from, real foods. And so in the paleo, there wouldn't be grains or dairy, foods that don't really need to be processed. So you're really focusing on whole foods. So a lot of protein, some fat, some vegetables, fruits. And there's not any emphasis really on amounts to eat, macronutrients, micronutrients, that type of stuff. It's more just like what would the hunter and gatherers eat,
Okay.
And then when I say it's been shifted a little bit, so you can see paleo treats in the grocery store that are, and sometimes that just means like, oh, this doesn't contain sugar, and it's just has some nuts and some oils and so different things. So would that be really something that somebody would have eaten in the Paleolithic era? Probably not, but it fits kind of in that nutritional idea of sticking with whole foods, staying away from sugars, staying away from some of our sort of modern convenience foods.
Okay. And that's why there can be different levels of what paleo means, because it's kind of been stretched into a more modern way of eating, where you do have like almond flour cookies that
Yes.
probably would have loved to have eaten, but definitely would not have had access to.
Right. Absolutely.
Okay. So paleo, whole foods, no grains, more protein, fat, vegetables, nuts, seeds.
Yes.
Okay.
Good.
All right.
Good.
How is that different from keto?
Great question. So keto is more, really kind of focuses more on the macronutrient aspect. And what I mean by that is typically a higher fat diet. So might be anywhere between 70 and 80% fat. And then the protein would be, between like 15 and 20%. And then carbohydrates really low. It could be anywhere between could be like 5 to 10%. Some people will do a little bit higher. So there's different levels of keto. And the idea of keto, what makes it sort of different from paleo or Mediterranean or some of the other diets is it's a diet that's really used to help you burn energy in a different way. So you get energy from fat instead of energy from glucose, which is what we're kind of typically used to getting energy from just on a day-to-day level, most of us. Yeah.
Okay, so you are actually needing to pay attention to the breakdown, like almost the scientific breakdown of your macros, your carbs, fat, protein, because you're trying to get down to where you're only taking in so many carbs so that your body can metabolize fat instead of sugar. Yes. Where is that cutoff?
So usually it's no more than like 20% carbs. And with that, it would be specific kinds of carbs. So having vegetables, and we would say like above the ground vegetables, so dark leafy greens, sort of vegetables that are not like root vegetables.
No potatoes.
No potatoes typically for that. And I kind of think with the keto, so if you want to do it and then you are like, I have to have this certain carbohydrate, like I need an apple every day, or even some people even say like, you know what, I need a glass of wine every day. Then you just say like you budget in those carbs. Okay. So that's the carbs that you're having for the day. And then the rest of the day, you would focus on the fats and the protein. And the thing that's kind of interesting and strange for people about the keto diet is you really are focusing more on the fat. Because if you have a high protein diet, too much protein can actually turn into glucose. So then you're not sort of getting that, staying in that state where you're burning fat, which we would call ketosis.
Okay.
So, yeah.
So that really makes sense why you need to pay such close attention to it, because you're needing to like titrate and like keep your levels in the right happy medium. Enough protein, but not too much protein, because then you've got glucose going on that you don't want to have. Enough carbs that you like, but not too much.
Yeah, and that's kind of a good segue. So there is, within keto, of course, there's a bunch of different ways that you can do it, but there is one way that's called keto flex, which is a little more flexible, hence the name. So, and what happens in that, and I don't need to go into all the science of it, but basically it gives people the opportunity to switch back and forth between burning glucose and burning fat for energy. And so there's a little bit more flexibility with the amount of carbs that you can have and the amount of protein and the amount of fat. Okay. Yeah.
Cool. And then what about the anti-inflammatory diet? What is that in relation to keto, keto flex, paleo, what we've been talking about?
Oh, yeah. Good question. It honestly kind of ties them all together, because anti-inflammatory diet and to start with, like foods that are anti-inflammatory can be different for different people, depending on if you could have a specific food allergy to something, and that can cause inflammation in your body. So, so for some people, I would say, well, go to a gluten-free diet and eat these gluten-free grains, but that might cause inflammation in somebody else. So I think it is good to kind of know your body. But overall, anti-inflammatory foods are eating a lot of fruits and vegetables. Kind of think of like plant-based, and that doesn't mean that you can't have meat, but really focusing on having a lot of vegetables, fruits, whole grains, some meats, but meat is good to have in smaller quantities, sort of more like a, sort of standard American diet is like get a big piece of meat and then have your little vegetables. But to think about meat as sort of like a complement to your meal, not your whole meal. Yeah. Fish is great for anti-inflammatory diet. Let's see. Well, again, staying away from just like your general processed foods. So staying away from chips, crackers, cookies, any sugary drinks, so really soda, sports drinks, Gatorade, all that kind of stuff. Yeah.
Okay. So pulling, like just zooming out for a minute, And what's really fun about having gone through each of these diets at once is it just makes it so obvious that the common denominator is avoid processed food, don't have a lot of sugar, have lots of plants and fiber and, fruits and vegetables, because those are constants, in each of those diets, which makes sense. So how do you know which one's best for you? You talked about knowing your body. How do you know if you should go keto or if you should go anti-inflammatory?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I think that, if you're someone, one thing is to really either be clear or get clear with some support about what are your health goals. So are your health goals just to get healthier? Do you want to just eat better and pay more attention to what you're putting in your body? And if that's the case, then I usually would work with somebody to say, well, let's get on an like Mediterranean or anti-inflammatory diet, because that gives you more options. You can have grains, you can have just a little more variety in your diet. And so that can be a really good transitional diet for people. I think earlier in the conversation, we talked about how that's kind of easier, a good transition from the standard American diet. But in reality, it's really hard to change food habits. So sometimes having some steps is helpful. So then for more, paleo or keto, I think if you have specific goals of like working on blood sugar issues, diabetes, they've even done a lot of studies with like Alzheimer's and seizures and different kind of neurological issues where getting your body in a state of ketosis can be really helpful. I sort of think of those as like a little bit more advanced diets, in that like you've already kind of made a transition to eating whole foods, treating your body really well, and you're ready to take it to the next step, whether it's for a medical reason or just something that you want to improve in your own health.
That makes a lot of sense. So lead with your health goals, kind of step back and assess, what do I actually want to see my health, where do I want my health to go? And then from there, if you're coming from a standard American diet, since change is really hard, change around food is really hard, start with a lifestyle shift that's less extreme, go to anti-inflammatory or the Mediterranean diet where you've got more options. And then maybe a year or two down the road, or whenever you feel ready or are interested in shifting your health goals, if you want, then explore keto or keto flex or paleo and see if those are better fit.
Yeah, absolutely. One thing I just like to add to that is it's also just really good to know yourself and to be realistic about what you think you're going to be able to do and maybe what has worked for you in the past. So if something super strict is not something that's going to work either with your lifestyle or your budget or your, just general circumstances, then thinking about because the most important thing is to find something that you can maintain and make a lifestyle and not a diet,
Absolutely. Yes, no, I think that self-reflection piece is really important, and self-compassion maybe too, just because it's hard and we live in a society where the environment makes it really easy to eat the way I did growing up, with a mixture of some healthy and then Doritos and McDonald's like McFlurries.
Exactly.
We drive past them, they're easy, and it's hard to make changes and to shift, and it can happen, but it's helpful to start small, to have clear goals, to kind of think about the big picture. Yeah. Thank you so much, Katherine, for taking a few minutes and talking with us about these different ways of eating and how to know what to reach for, if you're trying to pick one of them. Thank you.
Oh yeah. Love talking about it.